All right, folks, welcome back. We're rejoined by prominent Iranian author Dr. Marc Benhuri and his book, Price for Freedom, and senior analyst for LIGNET, Lisa Ruth. And Doctor, let me have you pick up on what Lisa left off with, the speculation that possibly Hamas launched this attack on Israel and is persisting in the manner that they are at the behest of Iran.
I would like to give a little bit background when this talk started, because I believe it's
You mean
important.
the talks between Iran and the U.S. and the other nations?
The allies,
yeah.
right. At the time before the talk, Iranian government was going bankrupt, was absolutely bankrupt. The Iranian gas company applied for bankruptcy 2 weeks before the talk started. It was over 4 months the government official in Iran and the worker did not get paid. As I talked to a lot of people in Iran, they were begging, please don't start the talk and don't ease up the sanction because this government is collapsing. Unfortunately, nobody hear me or nobody listen to anybody else that they should not start this talk. But it was a very opportune time that because this was supposed to be finished by July 29, but the extension that they were given was at the time that the world attention was all on Israel and Hamas. And I think this was purposely done by Iran in order to divert that attention from this extension. And I do not understand why the House and Senate want to agree with this or accept this, extension.
Yeah, the extension on the talk deadline and the lifting of some of the sanctions at the same time. Let me get back on track, Lisa, with Hamas and what's going on. Do you believe that this is Hamas believes that this is their last stand, so to speak?
I certainly think that's a possibility. I think what they're trying to do right now, really, they need those tunnels, but they need the border open. And it seems to me that eventually Hamas will negotiate. They're going to end up having to negotiate, having to agree to a ceasefire, or else they are going to be done. And I think the question is going to be when that happens. I would not be surprised if Hamas miraculously comes up with its own ceasefire plan so that it can look like the great peace negotiators here. But there is a point where if they do not negotiate, Israel's not kidding around anymore. I think they've tried to kind of play nice, and this is it. And Hamas is in a situation right now where it's trying to play exactly on that media coverage we were talking about earlier. It's trying to get international support. And if you look at the protests across the world, there are places where it is winning, that PR game, if you will. But ultimately, Hamas is going to have to negotiate, or there is no more Hamas.
Right. You agree with that, Doctor?
No. I honestly believe that Israel should go with all the force that they have and they try to destroy every single tunnel and the missile they have. World opinion lasts 1 week. Israel have to finish this and there is no consequences gonna ever happen to Israeli because they are defending their nation.
Yeah, no, well, look, I can't imagine that, I'm shocked that Hamas has been so stringent and steadfast in their refusal on every single ceasefire, and every single ceasefire, even for humanitarian purposes, that Israel has abided by, even Hamas has abided by for a little while, they have then broken.
I have something to tell you here.
Yes, sir.
You know, a lot of people, including the Secretary General of United Nations, they blame Israel for the number of the casualty and humanitarian help. But Israel, when the 12-hour ceasefire, sent tons of medicine and pharmaceutical and food and everything to the enemy that was sending them 150 rockets a day.
I know.
But Egyptian border, which is their own Arab brother, was totally closed, and they didn't be given 1 grain of rice.
Unbelievable.
And no reporter said that.
Doctor, pleasure to see you, Dr. Marc Benhuri, and of course, LIGNET senior analyst Lisa Ruth. Thank you both very much. And we'll be back, folks, with the founder and editor of the Weekly Standard, Bill Kristol. Don't go away.
On October 6, 1973, while the nation of Israel observed Yom Kippur, the holiest day of the year for Jews, the combined military forces of Egypt and Syria launched a simultaneous and surprise attack on Israel's southern and northern borders. Within days, the Israeli army found itself in retreat, losing a third of its equipment and outnumbered by the enemy 3-1.
As he could not believe, he said, we cannot stop them.
Recognizing their very existence was at stake, President Nixon moved quickly to resupply our ally Israel and their besieged army. With an around-the-clock airlift of U.S. military support, the tide of battle shifted, and soon the Israeli armies were advancing into both Syria and Egypt, with Israeli General Ariel Sharon's tanks threatening Egypt's Third Army with annihilation. The Soviet Union, who were supporting the Arab armies, quickly called upon President Nixon to stop the Israelis' advance or risk a larger war. The president intervened, saved the Egyptian army, and then used the opportunity to convince Egypt's President Anwar Sadat to seek a peaceful solution to a conflict that had plagued the region for decades. You're watching An American Moment.